Maybe, yeah. If you were here last week or the week before, I don't remember. I left my mic on during one of the services, and so, man, I was worshiping right alongside Stella, and sometimes maybe a little louder than Stella because I was just belting it, and I'm getting text messages. Hey, Chris, we hear you. Gosh, attendance has been on the decline since. So now I'm like trigger, like shy with my little on-off switch back here. But we're in a series called Did God Really Say? And I'm really grateful that you're here for the third and final of it. Now, it's like interesting that this is the first series that's coming to a completion. Before you know it, it'll be Easter, and then we'll be putting Christmas trees back up. So like this year, sorry, I couldn't help it. But this series has been by far just a breath of fresh air for me personally because it's caused me to teach differently than I usually teach. I am a pretty high level feeler. And so when I teach, I'm thinking through the lens of what you're feeling. I'm constantly working in my mind, like how is this perceived? How are they taking this? And that's why when you sleep when I'm teaching, it really breaks my heart. I'm just kidding, but I'm looking and I'm sensing like, hey, is this making sense? Are they listening? Are they tuned in? But this series has caused me to teach in a way that's released me from the feeling side. And I'm leaving you each with a question to wrestle with. And I so badly want to answer the question. But that's not valuable. It's not valuable for me to tell you what you should think and what you should feel and what you should believe. It's valuable for me to present to you options. And of course, I'm always going to lean towards what my opinions and my beliefs, but I'm going to lead you in this series towards a question. And each week we wrestle with a question. Behind all of the questions has been this thought. And the thought is, what is true? Because in this world, we will always struggle with what is true. Worldly truth is always changing. It's never the same. What's true today will not be true in 50 years. It just always happens that way. My parents are probably watching online, and there's times where they look at my style of parenting, and they're like, if we were parenting you in our generation, this would not be happening. But because times change and truth change, and what was good for kids then is not good for kids now. Like the world is constantly changing its truth. In fact, just to give you some like real good examples. When I was growing up, like in elementary school, we made these things called planetariums, where you hung from a clothes hanger all the planets. Now, when I was a kid, there was this little bitty planet on the very end that was really cold and far from the sun. We called it Pluto. Not the Disney dog, but it was a planet. And this planet was a very important planet in our existence, and we wanted to get to it and see it and all kinds of things. But Pluto was a planet. But today, our kids are no longer taught that Pluto is a planet. In fact, it's been kicked out. It doesn't belong anymore. It's actually the distant stepchild. It's kind of falling away further and further. One day, it won't even exist anymore. But truth changed. It once was a planet. It no longer is a planet. Let's get a little closer to reality. There was a time in our world where cocaine was the dream substance. It was so good for our world that we included it in Coca-Cola. And that's why we choose Coke over Pepsi to this day. A guy by the name of Caleb Hellerman said this: long before drug cartels, crack wars, and TV shows about addiction, cocaine was promoted as a wonder drug, sold as the cure-all, and praised by some of the greatest minds in medical history, including Sigmund Freud and the pioneering surgeon William Halsted. There was a point in time in our history where cocaine was literally the best thing ever. If we fast forward to our generation to now, we realize it is not the cure-all. In fact, it's one of the most heavily addicted substances on the face of our planet, generating billions of dollars in destruction every single year. I speak of this one instance because I lost a sister to an overdose. What was once praised, that this is the greatest thing ever, is now hailed as one of the greatest killing substances on this planet. And that people will risk life and death either getting it or figuring out a way to sell it. Truth changes in this world. And so it's led us on this journey of looking into the Old Testament at the first human beings, Adam and Eve. And we're looking at the creation story, but not through the lens of how and why did God create the earth. We're not looking through the lens of mankind and why God created them. We're looking at this story through the lens of what does this story mean to me? And as we looked at this story and we looked at their life, we've kind of been asking some questions, some core questions. And what we've been seeking is truth. Not a truth that changes, but an absolute, never changing truth. Because we know that what's true today in this world might not be true tomorrow. But Jesus made this bold, bold statement, this incredible claim that he was the way, the truth, and the life. He said that in him was truth, all truth, a truth that does not change. And so these questions that we've been asking week in and week out, and as we've looked at the story of Adam and Eve and their journey as human beings, we've wrestled with core questions to human existence. Like, who is God? Who am I? And we're going to journey in just a few minutes through the question of what is the best way to live. But the who is God question, we actually internalized it, made it personal. We ask ourselves, who is our God? Because the answer to that question determines everything in our life. Like knowing who our God is knowing what we turn to for absolute truth, for ultimate authority. Some of us will say it's God, and the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. We'll lean to that. We don't always live like it, but we'll still claim it. Some of us will actually say that we are our own God. We don't broadcast that on social media. We don't have as our email signature, God, Chris Crutchley. We don't like, no one laughed at that. That was awesome. Thank you. I'll write that. Don't ever say that again. We don't broadcast our lordship or our godship, but we live like it. We determine what's best for us. Like we look at our life and we evaluate, what do I want and how am I going to get it? And there's times where we're selfish. Like I don't really care what you want as long as it benefits what I want. So I'm going to go after this. And if you tag along, awesome. If you don't, no big deal. This is where I'm going. That's a God. Whoever determines will, desire, way, right, authority, that's God. And some of us in this room live like we are gods of our life. And we need to understand that if we are God of our life, then truth will always be changing. What is good today might not be good 50 years from now. What's good today might not be good a year from now. We don't know. What's right today might be wrong tomorrow. The authority of our life today might not be the authority of our life tomorrow because truth in this world changes. But God doesn't. And his truth remains the same. So the question was, who is your God? Week 2, we talked about who am I? And we use this verse in Romans chapter 12. Basically it says, do not conform to this world or don't copy this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And we got to this ultimate truth that regardless if you're conforming or being transformed, you are being formed. Every single person in this room is being formed. And we looked at a molecular structure of our brain. We went further in study of cells than I've ever been in my whole life. I wish I cared in high school like I cared studying now. I'd be a lot smarter today. But we looked at these cells in our brains that are being born brand new every single morning we wake up. And we learned that these cells are formable. They're shapeable. And what shapes these cells is simply the way in which we think. And when we learned a very important truth, that what we think about is what we become. What we allow to influence us, and we are being influenced constantly, is actually forming us. We could be conformed or transformed, but regardless, we're being formed. And so I asked the question, what has influence in your life? What do you give the greatest access into you? That's an important question for us to think through, because who you are is determined by how you're thinking, and whoever controls your thinking controls you. And today we're going to jump into this question: what is the best way to live? And I'll be honest with you, I do not like this question. I struggle because the best way to live sounds like a self-help book. I mean, it sounds like the best life ever, and this is what you should do, and, like a dummy's guide to this, or a, self-help guide to that. I feel like the question lends us to, well, just tell me the answer. What is the best way to live? And I don't want to do that. Like I don't want you to come to church on Sunday mornings and be like, whatever Chris says is right. I kind of was, my parents didn't raise me this way, but I was raised in a culture where we didn't question, we just heard. But we never took time to study, and this is personal, this is not necessarily the church, but I never took time to study, do I really believe this, or am I just being indoctrinated? Is this true for me, or is this just, what I hear? And so this morning, I'm going to ask some questions and present a way that's different, and it's not my way. It's the way of Jesus. And so the question we'll ask you is, what is the best way to live? And we just got to get a basis that we need to understand, that when you ask this question, the best way to live, there are going to be opposing voices immediately. We said a quote last week that is very true, that the genius of the human being is that our mind has the ability to hold both reality and unreality. At one point in time, we can keep within ourselves the ability to dream and discover and invent. I mean, if you think about it, I go back to my high school years, my freshman, the iPhone didn't exist. The smartphone wasn't a thing. I mean, it was just miraculous that we could talk to somebody without a cord attached to it. That we could send a written message, by typing a certain button multiple times. If you wanted a U or a V, you had to type number 9 a whole bunch. Or 8, I think. Anybody with me on that one? Did anybody? Tells me the age of my audience. But it was a huge deal. That was like a dream. I mean, no one needed an iPad, and now I can't live without the thing, We have that ability. It's our genius to dream and discover and invent. But the same thing that's our genius, the same strength can also be our greatest weakness. And that we have the potential to buy into something, to be deceived by something that's actually a lie. That we can believe it to be true. It's the greatest. It's a miracle. But yet really it's death and destruction. Our brain can handle both reality and unreality. And so we have to eventually ask the question, what is the best way to live? Is it chasing the unreality? Is it living in the reality? Is it trusting what I hope to be true, what I think to be true, what I'm not really sure is true? Or, man, this is really, I just feels great. I'm going to go after this. What is the best way to live? And I'm going to present the way of Jesus. But the beauty in Jesus is that he doesn't come out and say, you can't do anything but. He doesn't come out as a force to be reckoned with. He's not a God that dictates, because that's what a dictator is, or we would be robots. He comes out and he presents. The way of Jesus is very interesting, because I want you to think about the way he came. He came as a rabbi. We just celebrated Christmas. Yes, he came as a baby, born in a manger. He grew up in a family that wasn't wealthy or influential or affluent. He learned how to make furniture. He literally became a Jewish rabbi. A rabbi in our world would be a teacher of a way. That's how he came. And just hold on to the thoughts of Jesus for a second. And if you're new, I'm just going to present to you some truth. Jesus didn't come like a king comes today. If anyone's born in a monarch, you're born to a certain level of prestige, a certain level of honor. The world stops when, now King Charles or one of his boys have a kid, because the monarchy continues. We just all watched as a world, as Queen Elizabeth died and King Charles assumed the throne. Like, there's just something in our world that we watch, and we see these kids that are born into a lifestyle that I don't think any of us have ever experienced. Like, there are rooms in their palaces that are bigger than all of our houses combined. All right, like, they have a gate around their house, and some of you live in gated communities, that's awesome, but their gates are guarded by palace guards. I don't think you have that. You might, but we can keep on going. They have more than you. Like when a king, or I'm sorry, when a son or a daughter is born, they're prince and princess. They're ultimately assigned a position. They're ultimately given honor and respect. Have they earned it? No. Do they deserve it from everybody? Yes, because that's their king, they're their queen, their future. That's how we see kings. But Jesus came as a king, and he didn't come the way every other king or queen came. He came to a house of poverty. He came to a people who weren't cutting edge and leading the communities. He came differently. He was a teacher. And in his approach, he didn't go to the highest levels of school. He didn't go to the largest, most huge rooms of gatherings or teachings. He didn't go to the theaters. I mean, he didn't go to the stadiums. No, he went to homes. He went to people. He went to fishermen. He would sit on rocks or sit outside in community areas, and people would gather to listen to him teach about a new way. And in his teaching, he was developing mental maps, new mental maps to a different reality. If you weren't at week 1, we talked about mental maps. Mental maps are literally just a web of ideas that are being formulated from the day we open our eyes until we die. And these mental maps are our teachings and our learnings of those around us and our experiences. And these mental maps are creating webs of ideas, of thoughts and processes and feelings and beliefs and opinions that ultimately determine our worldview. Like who we are, what we exist for, our purpose, what the world looks like and how we want to adapt to it or in it, what's right and wrong, what's justice or injustice. These are all formed by these web of ideas called mental maps. And Jesus wanted to develop new mental maps. And so he shows up on the scene and he gives a different perspective. I don't know if you ever done this or seen this. It's kind of fascinating to me. If you're at a restaurant today, try it. If you have a clear glass that's full of water, take your straw and put it in it and hold it up. I don't know how this happens, but water splits your straw in half. If you hold up your glass of water and you put your straw in it, somehow, magic, I don't know any way, your straw splits. And you got the base half that's submerged and sinks. And you have the top half that comes out and balances. And I don't know how it doesn't fall out, but it's split. There's 2 different straws if you look through that glass. It's a phenomenon if you've never studied this before. I mean, it's a miracle. But if you were to pour the water out, your straw comes back together. It's amazing. I hope you all know that I'm not crazy, okay? But when you look at it, you see 2 straws. It's a false reality. It's not real. The water is changing our view. Jesus came to fix our view. He came to get rid of the distortion. He came to show us what sin actually does and how in him there was freedom and forgiveness of that. Jesus came to correct the image of the straw. He came to change our broken lives. And so he speaks truth. And so in the story of Luke, or in the book of Luke, he's about to deliver his most famous sermon. We call it Sermon on the Mount. We can read it in Matthew, we can read it in Luke, but this sermon that he delivers is against culture. He's going to teach some things that present a different way. To people who are asking, what's the best way? How should I live? He presents 2 cases. He says this in Luke 6, starting in verse 20. He says, "Then Jesus turned to his disciples and said, And if you have your Bibles, like hang out with me. I want you to like underline or circle or highlight, do your thing. If you have a tablet, I don't know, like however you highlight or underline, do it. Or mentally, just hold on to it. He says, then Jesus turned to his disciples and said, God blesses you who are poor. Like circle, underline, highlight the word poor. And just hold on to that thought for a minute. He blesses. He gives his approval. He pours out what he says is right. He affirms, hey, blessed are those who are poor, for the kingdom of God is yours. Verse 21. God blesses you who are hungry now. Circle, highlight, something, hungry, underline it. For you will be satisfied. It says, God blesses you who weep. Are you who weep now? Circle, weep, highlight, underline, weep. For in due time you will laugh. Okay, so he says, blessed are those who are poor, who are hungry, who weep. And then he goes on verse 22. What blessings await you when people hate you? Underline that one. Really? Okay. All right. Jesus is starting to sound a little weird. All right. Like culture doesn't say those words, but Jesus does. He's obviously setting himself apart. What blessings await you when people hate you and exclude you? Wow. And mock you. Okay. And curse you. Really? Curse you as evil because you follow the Son of Man or Jesus. That's a hard teaching to hold on to. It's hard today. It was hard then. That was not what they wanted to hear. Verse 23, when that happens, Jesus says, be happy. Oh, sure. Okay. Yes. Leap for joy. Really? Okay. For a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, their ancestors treated the ancient prophets the same way. So Jesus starts off this teaching, and he sounds completely crazy. Like if you're here this morning and you're like, I'm not really sure I want to follow Jesus, I completely understand. He sounds like a lunatic. Like anyone who comes out and says, blessed are you who are poor and hungry and who weep, I'm going to be like, oh, hold on for a second. Like that doesn't fit my reality. It's not something I aspire to be. Imagine teaching your children, hey, listen, guys, when you go to school today, I just want you, I know that there's a lot of kids around you, especially if you have kids like in fourth grade or above. I know that your friends have the best and the greatest iPhone in the world. I'm never going to give you one because we're poor. You teach them that, all right? Like just see what your little kid says to you. Hey, when you go to school today, I know I can't send you it's good to be hungry sometimes. Sorry, There was this story that I don't tell often, and I don't remember which kid it is. My kids they remember this well. I forgot. I sent my kids, I used to pack all their lunches. Now we go to a school that they eat better than I do. But nonetheless, I sent my kid to school, and I put 2 pieces of bread in their lunch box and forgot to put anything else in there. Like, there's 2 pieces of bread. I was teaching them what it meant to be hungry, Okay, so God, through Jesus, is speaking this way that sounds completely ridiculous. He says, listen, I want you to know that there's a way to life, and it's through weakness and sacrifice and sorrow and rejection. There's a way to life, and I know you're going to be faced with multiple times where you're going to want to present yourself as capable and strong, and you got it, and and you're the best. You're going to want to present yourself that way because you want to be seen as confident and secure. But I want you to know it's okay. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to admit that you were wrong, that you failed. It's okay to admit that you don't have it all together and that you've made some mistakes. It's okay to say that you're afraid and you're uncertain, maybe even you're unsure. Jesus presents this way that's completely different than the world. It's not only weakness, but hey, it's okay to sacrifice. In fact, that's the way of me. The way of me is that you're going to put your desires, your dreams aside for the sake of others. You're going to sacrifice your wants and what you love and what you hope for, and you're actually going to put the needs and the hopes and the dreams of others before yours. Hey, listen, you're going to face sorrow. There are going to be people around you that have all these things that you just wish you could have. There are gonna be people around you that, man, they're living the best life, and you're gonna question, you're gonna wonder, what did I do wrong? Because I don't have what they have. Like, what did I do? Like, I worked really hard, I tried, and why didn't I get what they got? You're gonna face moments where you feel sorrow. Like, man, I must have got it wrong. I must have been bad or something. You're gonna face moments where you face sorrow or even rejection. Moments where he says, like, the world's going this way and doing this, and I'm gonna call you to this. And people aren't gonna stick with you. They're not gonna be like, hey, that's not the way I wanna go. That's not the way the world's going. Like, why are you going that way? You're gonna face rejection. He names out these 4 kind of core issues: weakness, sacrifice, sorrow, and rejection. He's like, this way is blessed. And we're like, blessed with what? A lot of money? Blessed with a lot of, like, feel good about myself. Like, do I get some power in there? Like, do people like report to me? Do I get to be CEO for doing these things, God? Like, this is how we kind of approach it. He said, no, your blessing is the kingdom of God. Your blessing is a sense of feeling complete. Your blessing is that in due time you will laugh. Well, that ain't gonna get me far. This is a struggle. He presents a whole new way of living, but he's not finished. In Luke 6:24, he says these. He says, what sorrow awaits you who are rich. Underline, highlight, circle. For you have your only happiness now. What sorrow awaits you who are fat and prosperous now. Interesting definition there. For a time of awful hunger awaits you. What sorrow awaits you who laugh now? For your laughing will turn to mourning and sorrow. What sorrow awaits you who are praised by the crowds? For their ancestors also praised false prophets. So to the first, he presents blessing. To the second, he presents sorrow. Like, what sadness awaits you who have power and comfort and success and recognition. If I were to put these 2 sets of words in front of you, like, don't raise your hand, don't speak out loud, but I just want you to answer this question. Which would you choose? Would you choose weakness, sacrifice, sorrow, rejection, like A, or B? Power, comfort, success, recognition. Like, I'm just gonna be honest with you, I would choose B. Like, in my humanity, who wouldn't choose power and comfort and success and recognition? That sounds amazing. It just sounds good. It sounds right. It sounds awesome. I mean, like, I think about success. It means I get what I want. Recognition, people look to me and praise me. Like, oh yes, comfort. Who doesn't want comfort? I mean, we live in a world at war. Like, sickness and disease abound. Brokenness all around us. It'd be nice to have a little bit of comfort in this world. And how about power? Oh gosh, listen guys. Like, I'm a superhero fanatic. I mean, I go to the extreme. Remember how the brain can reality and unreality? Like, I can live in unreality. Like, I want power. I crave, like, how it'd be awesome. If I was driving on the road, somebody cut me off, if I could just be like, whoa, and their car would go up the side of the road, like, I know. Sounds crazy, right? But that's what power is. Power is simply control. Like, we just long to have that kind of control. That's who we are. And so if I put 2 lists in front of you, we'd be like, no, I'm choosing B. I want power and comfort, success, and recognition. No one chooses the first one. I said this quote last week, and I'll repeat it. A guy by the name of Blaise Pascal. People almost invariably arrive at their beliefs, not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. So much of the world chooses power, comfort, success, recognition. Why? Because that feels good. And we are a people that love feeling good right now. We love it. I mean, when I read this, sorrow awaits you are fat and prosperous. Man, there's nothing like the comfort of food. Like I can eat something that's real good and be like, that was awesome. You know what? I want more. Why? Because it feels good. Jamie and I went on our first cruise, a whole bunch of years ago before Eli was born. And I remember I'm sitting at the table on our cruise ship, and the waiter asked me the most dangerous question in my life. Is that all? What do you mean? Wait. I just ordered a steak. Is that all? He said, well, would you like 2 of them? What? I can have more? All of you are signing up for cruises today. Like, yeah, I want more. How many can I have? Well, this is you've paid for it as much as you want. Like that's what I crave, more. More power, more control, more satisfying food that brings deep levels of comfort. You're lucky this guy in 1,000 pounds, because that's what we long for. That's what the world says. People almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not based on proof or truth, but how it makes us feel. And so we've bought into a lie. Hook, line, sinker. That power, success, recognition, comfort, that those things actually provide what we're looking for. And because we feel good, we stay. And we just long for more and more and more. So in culture, there's been 2 phrases that have surfaced in the last 100 years that have redirected human pathway. Okay, and I'll state it this way first. 50 plus years ago, level of wealth or status was deemed by or presented, this is how successful you are, this is how wealthy you are, based on your leisure activity, how well you retreated, how well you vacationed. That was how, successful you were. Man, did you see when they went on vacation? Did you see what they do on their breaks? And did you see how they rode on that boat and they lived on that lake or they went to that resort? Everything was deemed on how well you were leisuring. Not anymore today. Today what is true is how busy you are. How successful you are is determined by what level of leadership you have and how many days you spend in the office and how many hours you have and how many people you lead. Your banking account size determines your level of significance. The truth of who you are and how wealthy you are and how significant you are literally has changed. And it's shown in culture. A little over 100 years ago, a phrase came out. And the phrase didn't take immediate work. It slowly drifted into our culture, bleeding into our thought patterns. It was a word or a phrase that said, be true to you, yourself. Be true to you. And that's the little phrase. We can see here and that's not that bad. No, it's actually, I get it, understand. But I just need you to think for a moment. Where did this phrase come from? This be true to you. Because that wasn't the original philosophy of life. Be true to you. It was new. And it came, because none of you answered me yet, it came from a play called Hamlet. And this guy by the name of, thank you, he said it, I can't say it. He said these words, to thine own self be true. To thine own self be true. This little bitty phrase by a man who's actually deemed a fool in the play. A man who literally had no value or no worth. His little bitty phrase has changed culture. And slowly but surely people begin to buy into that whole, to thine own self be true, and it became be true to you. What makes you happy? What makes you feel significant and valuable and worthy? Be true to you. But this be true to you poses a problem, a very significant problem, in that you have to answer the question, well, which self do you be true to? I have multiple selves. Leaving a long day at work, getting in my car, driving home, I have two selves kind of raging a war in me. One says, go home and turn on the TV, light the fire, and do nothing. Just chill out. Like, just go and do what makes you happy, Chris, what brings you joy. Go and just be, you know what, Chris, you love cutting the grass. Just go and spend the next 2 hours until the sun sets, cutting the grass. Go out there and just do what makes you happy. That's one self. But there's another self in me that says you love your wife and kids. And they deserve your best, not your least or your worst. They deserve your attention and your affection. They need to know that they're the most important thing in your life. So when you get home, Chris, give them everything you have. You're like, well, I don't know how much more I've got left. And I've got two selves that are opposing one another. Which self do I be true to? Which one do I choose? Because to thine own self be true is struggling here. There's another phrase that comes to mind. The next phrase is this: follow your heart. Man, there's these two phrases that have literally changed human direction. Follow your heart. Again, 100 years ago, Sigmund Freud said these words. He said that the most important desire, the highest good in your life is your pleasure. The highest level of good is you finding out what brings you the most joy and seeking with everything you got. That was not the foundation. That was not the philosophy that Christendom was kind of built on. Augustine said these words. He said that love is the highest good. And he went on to say that our problem is not with love. Our problem is that we either love the wrong thing or we love the right thing in the wrong order. But love is this outward pouring out of ourselves, putting others first. That I'm going to love them more than I love myself. Now we get the order mixed up wrong, or sometimes we love the wrong things, but nonetheless, love is this outward affection, emotion, this outward drive to put others before ourselves. That was the basis. And he said, pure love is what brings all goodness to us. And then culture began to shift. It's not necessarily pure love. It's actually what brings you pleasure. Freud went on to say these things. He said that repression of your desires, listen to this, repression of your desires is the basis for all neurosis or a negative internal state. He's basically saying that the reason you're not happy is because you're not getting what you want. And that if you want to be happy, go find pleasure and just go for it. To thine own self be true. And so we have these opposing thoughts. Jesus says, this is the way that's blessed. Our world says, this is the way that's blessed. Christendom was founded on the principle of love, pure love. But philosophy has changed to pleasure, pure pleasure. So what do we choose? What is the best way? Well, I want you to hear what Jesus has to say about the way of the world. I want you to hear what Jesus has to say about our human heart. Actually, God speaks to a prophet in Jeremiah, Old Testament verse. Jeremiah 17:9, he says these words: the human heart, not the Christian heart, not the Jesus heart, not this religion or that religion, not the Roman heart or the Egyptian heart. The human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Those are strong words. Like, ouch, that hurt a little bit. My heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. Who knows how bad it is? This is the condition of mankind. The human heart is deceitful. You don't trust things that are deceitful. You don't follow things that are desperately wicked. But we have these values in our life that says, follow your heart. I don't know if I want to follow my heart anymore. Philippians, Paul's teaching to a group of believers. He's writing a letter to a church. And he speaks to humanity. He actually speaks to people. Philippians 3:19, he says this: they are headed for destruction. It's mankind. They are headed towards destruction. Their God is their appetite. What drives you? Your hunger. Man, listen, there is nothing more consuming than the desire for food. It's a part of our DNA. When we start thinking about food, man, it is consuming. When I start thinking about Oreos and milk, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just can't wait to get a hold of it. It's my favorite. is actually one of my favorites. I can mention ice cream and peanut butter. I have a whole bunch of things that when my appetite gets set on them, I can't wait. And he speaks these words. He says, listen, their God. When I asked the question in week 2, like, who is your God? Their God is their appetite. Whatever they long for, whatever they want, that's what they go for. That's their God. They brag about shameful things. You don't believe what I did. Look what I accomplished. Look what I built on lies or mischievousness or hurting others. He says, and they think only about life here on earth. He speaks to the way of the world. You're born with a heart that is deceitful above all things and is desperately wicked. And you exist in a world surrounded by people whose God is their appetites, including yours. Where it's like, whatever I want, I'm going after it. It's your nature. It's what you're born with. This is the way of the world. And then Jesus says these words in Matthew 16. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower. You remember Jesus came as a guide, a rabbi, a teacher of a new way. If any of you want to follow me, he says, you must give up your own way. You remember those words we used? We said weakness, sacrifice, sorrow, and rejection. You must give up your way that longs for control and power and success and comfort. You must set those aside. You must let them go. You must give them up. And he says these words, take up your cross. The story of Jesus is this, that he carried a cross to a hill called Golgotha where Roman legionnaires, they held him, bound him, and then drove nails to his hands. This cross would ultimately become the instrument that killed him. And he says to those who want to follow him, he says, give up your way and pick up the instrument that will actually kill you. It will destroy you. Your will, your wants, your way. Yeah, pick up that thing, that cross, and carry it. Bring it with you and follow me. You see, the way of Jesus is completely opposite. Some would say it's upside down, but I think the truth is actually right side up. I think we live in a world that's constantly persuading, constantly speaking, trying to form our mental maps, adjusting our web of ideas, shifting our worldview that this is what we're supposed to have. This is what you're supposed to obtain. You're supposed to look like, live like, act like, so that you feel like this. Your pleasure, to thine own self be true. Follow your heart. Just go and be who you want to be. And Jesus is like, that's not the best way. The best way is a life that's surrendered. A life that loves and looks to and trusts in someone bigger than themselves. Someone who knows the way, who is the truth, and offers ultimate life, both here on earth and in eternity, far beyond the days of your life on earth. When you're dead here and you exist in eternity, thinking through, which which Philippians says, they only think about life here on earth. Jesus is like, hey, I'm thinking about here on earth and the millions and millions of years to come. His way is different. So there's two ways. Which one's the best? I want you to know this. We live out what we trust in. Last week we said this, what we think ultimately is who we become. Okay, so that's us. And now we have a new step. We actually live out. We exist. We do what we trust in. So the answer to what is the best way has only two choices. It's you or it's Jesus. And they're opposite. One will drive you to more comfort, more control, more power, more success. The other will draw you to freedom. It'll draw you to this place of trust, of sacrifice, of weakness, not in the terms of how strong you are, but how vulnerable you can be, how willing you are to expose or allow the world to see that maybe there's times where you don't have it all together. Maybe there's times where you've failed or fallen. You've made a mistake. You're not perfect. But you serve a God who loves you regardless. You see, in those moments of weakness, what we realize is that the world doesn't have control over us because we're bought, we're purchased, we're valuable in the eyes of that who owns us, which is Jesus, who gave his life for us. But you have to answer that question. Where do you place your trust? In yourself or in Jesus? I'll say this. There's only one person in this world who died and came back to life. There's only one person in this world who lived a perfect life and then gave up his life, surrendered his power, his authority, his control for the sake of those who would call upon his name, for those who would place their trust in his name, Jesus. There's only one. There are none other like him. I suggest trying to place your trust in him. And if you would like to do that one day, if you'd like to do that today, it's actually really simple. He says, confess with your mouth that Jesus, he is Lord. And believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. And the words he uses here, you will be saved. And a lot of us go immediately to hell. I was raised that way. Yes, please, I want a get out of hell free card. Okay, like, yes. You say, no. You'll be saved from a life of desiring more of that which doesn't satisfy. You'll be saved of pursuing and running for something that gives you value for a second and then tells you you're worthless. You'll be saved from looking for the approval of man, and you will experience peace like none other. You will experience a God who not only you can trust, but you can look to when things are uncertain. You can rejoice when he gets you through things that you didn't think you were going to make it through. You can trust in a God who says, listen, I'll never leave you or forsake you. You can trust in a God who says this, there is no greater love than that which one would lay his life down for. And he did that for us. Which one will you place your trust in? If it's Jesus, you simply have to acknowledge, I believe and I trust you. I want to follow you. If it's the way of you, keep doing what you're doing. Let me pray for us. God, thanks for the day. Thanks for the truth of your word. And thanks for the guidance. Jesus, you don't come as a dictator declaring your rule and reign, stating if you have to, you must, you better if you don't. No, you come as a God who loves and says, I'm going to give you an opportunity to choose. Choose a way. And then you present, this is a way of blessing forever. And this is the way of pleasure for now. God, I pray that the hearts in this room and my heart would be convicted to desire the way of you. That Jesus, we would look to you, that you would be what we place our trust in. To trust you for our value, to trust you for our security, to trust you for our strength, to trust you for our life. I mean, we desire that. May we seek that. May that be our ultimate truth, our ultimate authority, you, Jesus. We love you. It's in your name I pray. Amen. Thanks for being here. I love you guys. You're dismissed. We'll see you next week for a new series.